You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
This week's Law & Order Marathon winner is Megan Lambert of Macedon, New York. Megan will get a marathon decal showing she watched 26.2 hours of her favorite crime show. To be next week's winner, sign up at lawandorderpodcast.com.
I'm Kevin Flynn with Rebecca Lavoie and Kimmie Smith, and these are their stories.
You think you know who did it, but you don't know who did it. Law and order, law and order, law and order. It's no ordinary police procedural, baby. It's the FNOG of police procedurals, baby. Law and order, law and order, law and order, law and order. These are their stories, these are their stories.
Welcome to These Are Their Stories, the podcast about network TV's most enduring crime franchise and the real-life cases that inspired their shows. I'm Kevin Flynn. Each podcast will break down an episode from either Criminal Intent, SVU, or Original Recipe. And today we're looking at SVU Season 15, Episode 11, Amaro's 180.
Our new mayor is looking for a poster boy for excessive force. IAB is here to serve up Amaro as the sacrificial lamb.
Joining me to do just that is true crime author and the host of Crime Writers On and Slate's Mom and Dad Are Fighting podcasts, Rebecca Lavoie. Hello, Rebecca.
Hello, Kevin. I'm not quite over you making me do an episode that's so Amaro-centric, but we'll see how it works out.
Don't worry, life goes on. And rounding out the panel is our special guest from the Athleisure mag, the co-founder, creative director, all-around super person, superhero, Kimmie Smith. Hi, Kimmie.
Hi, guys. Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
How many different titles do you have at that place?
It's a few. When you kind of, well, you guys know, if you run your own business, you kind of take on a lot of different things. And then also just my background in fashion, I've kind of earned those titles over the past few years, one way or another.
Well, it's funny because we didn't have to convince anybody that we could podcast before they let us do that. So how did you convince people that this would be something that you'd be good at, making models and celebrities look even better?
So my background, I've always been in the digital space. I've launched a number of blogs and little content centers, and I've worked with a lot of really big brands from, Coach to this one to that one as a face of their brand, doing HSN, face of, brands for that. And then interestingly enough, my boyfriend who works with me and is my co-founder and he also manages me was like, this is great that you're doing all these things, but we need a place to just bring everything together, utilizing the contacts that you have. And people like what I do. They like the type of stuff that we present as a team of 10 to 12 of us. And that's how we've done it. The magazines have been around for 3 years now. So athletes, fashion, food, fitness, and all that type of stuff falls under it. So it's just, so exciting.
It looks great. I've looked at a couple of issues,
now,
and it's
but you're the first fashion person we've had on the podcast. So I have something that I've been dying to ask a fashion person.
Oh, nice.
What do you think of the way they have evolved Ice-T's style on SVU?
Oh, good question.
He went from being really not divorced at all from his Ice-T persona to being this deconstructed fashionista.
Oh, don't forget in the middle there where they dressed him like a banker in a three-piece
exactly.
suit. With
there was that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that knowing him, I don't know him personally, but we do have some of the same circles. He has a lot of input into how he's, dressed. And once again, I think it lends itself that he has really embraced this kind of athleisure style. That's that easy New York style that has these great pieces that aren't too urban one way, but at the same time, really allow him to be, very movable when he's going from one place to the other. I don't quite know where the banker suiting section came up from. That might have been a different styling team. Or, sometimes as a stylist, you get a friend that has a hookup and you're able to go to a showroom. And they're like, sure, we need more of this. And you're like, okay, that's cool. And you're like, well, why is Ice-T going to a bank? I don't understand. So.
Well, we all know styling Munch was pretty easy.
It was pretty easy.
Just black. So, Kimmie, of all the franchises, which two cops are your favorite detective team?
Favorite Law and Order detective team.
So I have two sets of detective teams. A lot of people tell you I can never just choose one thing. From the CI side, I love Gorin and Eames. I think that I love them a lot. My boyfriend loves Gorin. He's obsessed with Gorin. And his Twitter conversations with him from time to time are quite interesting.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I'll just leave it at that. And obviously, I'm a Benson and Stabler girl. I like the whole did they or didn't they, and, always hoping that they would. And I love Maloney. I love Maloney in anything that he's in, but obviously in Law and Order, it's my favorite.
And do you have a favorite prosecutorial team?
Favorite Law and Order District Attorney Prosecutorial Team.
I am all about McCoy and Kincaid, without a doubt.
Yep.
OG, like almost OG. Classic choice.
Absolutely. I love how, they were always on a little bit of a different strategy to get things done and the tension that was there. I don't know. I'm a girl that goes for a lot of tension, so...
Did you enjoy her silk duet per duet suiting that she wore in like every episode ever that she appeared in?
I mean, she reminds me of an old school stylist friend of mine that used to do that all the time. And I was just like, really? You can't like pop something different? Could we go with a different color? What about a different fabrication? It
Nope.
kind of was like, did she go to bed like that? Did she get up like that? Like...
All right, now let's look at the first half of this episode, Amaro's 180 SVU Season 15. The episode is listed as either Episode 10 or 11, depending on your service. Well, after a really shitty dinner party celebrating Olivia's promotion to sergeant, Amaro and Rollins are walking home when a police foot chase crosses their path. Amaro follows an officer who just chased a kid with a gun into his own apartment. When he refuses to come out, the patrol woman takes a bullet to the leg, and Amaro pulls the trigger until it goes click. He just shot a 14-year-old black boy, left him paralyzed, and now no one can find the gun the kid supposedly had.
I had to shoot. She was down.
You don't need to explain it to me, Nick. In fact, you might not want to. Nothing's privileged.
Not sure that boy's gonna make it.
Let's let the doctors worry about that.
Amaro is racked with guilt despite following his training. Young Yusef has been left paralyzed. Now Tucker from IAB is investigating Nick with, oh no, new partner Brian Cassidy, Liv's boyfriend. They quiz everyone about how much Amaro drank at the party and whether anyone actually saw a gun. Meantime, here comes Reverend Scott. He's telling the press the police shooting is racially motivated. Doesn't help that cell phone video turns up of Amaro sticking his weapon around a blind corner, and it only gets worse when it's determined Officer McKenna was shot by a ricochet from her own weapon and Yusef never had a gun. Tucker takes Amaro's badge and places him under arrest. Okay, so we're celebrating Benson's promotion to sergeant, and even in a social setting, she's referring to people by their last name.
Rollins, would you do the honors? You mean poor?
Yes, and she's throwing her own party for her own promotion in her own apartment.
Congratulations to me.
And her boyfriend's not even home, which is like
so random and weird.
kind of shitty.
Yeah. Kimmie, is this the thing they do in Manhattan? Is that congratulations to me? I'm going to throw myself a party. You have to come?
Actually, sadly, yes. It happens a lot. Like you have extras at home. Maybe, your mom came over or whatever, and they cooked a bunch of stuff. And you're like, well, I'm about to have a new job. Why don't I just throw a party together? It's actually very common. The idea behind it is it's because other people will bring like maybe alcohol with them. So maybe you can keep a couple of bottles. But yes, you find yourself making your own parties, cleaning up the mess yourself. And then hopefully you get a bottle for all your trouble.
But apparently everybody brought their sidearm.
Well, apparently, like everybody else who can't wait to leave.
Well, yeah. I mean, Finn is like, okay, so how long do I have to stay? But then when they're like, oh, yeah, sure. Like, she's going to actually stay here. Then he's like, oh, it's a party now. And it's like, oh, okay.
So we see, a pretty dramatic opening. Remember, this is all before the opening credits, where we see a cop get hit by a car, go through the windshield.
And then no one ever asks about him ever again.
Yeah, he's okay.
Right. He just rolls off the glass and goes someplace.
That's right. He's fine.
Yeah, so they run into Amaro. We follow Amaro running into the hallway.
Going in.
No, wait, stop! Stay down. You okay?
What do we think of Nick Amaro, action hero?
I mean, Amaro, he is probably one of my least favorite characters.
Oh, no one has ever said that.
Yeah, he's just, it's always like womp womp, like the old Saturday Night Live where somebody's like, oh, this happened, but I didn't do whatever, womp womp. Like he's just so conflicted and feeling very displaced. But as a superhero in this particular thing, I thought it was great, but at the same time, it's just, everything with him is so forced. Everything is just always extra. He is the epitome of extra.
Rebecca, what do you think of this action-packed sequence? I mean, this is a little out of character for SVU.
It's a little out of character because they're rape cops, not like chasing people and shooting them cops. Like that, he talks a lot in this episode about my training just kicked in. And I'm like, what, you're training, watching old men watch porn on the internet? That training?
Like it's swabs or something like that, yeah.
No, but what's funny about this scene is for all of the stuff we see the cops do later in the episode, which I'm just going to say it right now, is shady as shit. We literally watch all these cops who we love try to cover up this police shooting in the way that we always suspect that they do. Like, as the viewer following Nick through this scenario where he watched somebody get shot, he does his due diligence, he actually stops with the cop who just got run over by the car and he says, are you sure you saw a gun? Like, that would ever happen.
Exactly.
Like, right? So he does his due diligence. He runs, he, shoots. It does look like to us, the viewer, like the other officer got shot. It all looks okay. And we don't actually see how young the boy is until he's down. And then we see Nick save his life with a hotel key or credit card or whatever the hell that is.
Yeah, I was like, what is that?
It's the American Express card.
Which I don't think he gets back,
It's
by
the
the
American
way.
Red Cross Express card.
Yeah.
Well, I like that they kept saying, oh, you saved his life. So, yeah, but you shot him first.
Exactly. But it felt like no one was really sticking up for him. Even the officer who gets shot, who is actually in Orange is the New Black, she was just like, oh, well, yeah, he did do that, I guess. And it's like, wait, you kind of saw what happened. He protected you.
You were there. But that's foreshadowing to future episodes, which, we're not going to talk about on this show. But
Right.
that whole unit turns out to be super corrupt. Right, Kevin?
If you say so.
I will say yes on that.
So we now know why boyfriend Cassidy was not at the dinner party.
Why?
Olivia told Eileen, Cragen's girlfriend, oh, no, he's undercover right now. But he wasn't.
Yeah.
He was working the night
Exactly.
shift on IAB.
That's right.
And so just another way to bring Cassidy in. And this is in the period where they're having, as one of our guests once said, Cassidy looks like dog meat.
Yes.
Cassidy looks in these episodes a little bit like he looks in those State Farm commercials he's in now.
That's what I was just going to say. I kept watching it. I'm like, mayhem, like me.
Yeah.
I'm the piece of candy lying under your car seat that you reach for before we get into the automobile wreck.
Exactly. Oh, my God.
I'm the unarmed kid running down the hallway with something shiny in his pocket.
That's right.
Now, the writers are definitely not ignoring what was going on in New York City politics in 2014. De Blasio is the new mayor, and he's been calling for police accountability.
Yep.
The new mayor and his commissioner believe only IAB can conduct an independent investigation.
Really, is that any time a cop fires or only when a teenage black kid gets shot?
That's a good question.
And so SVU is bringing this into their narrative. Does the show seem hostile to that view, or is it just showing some who are, some who aren't? Kimmie, let's start with you as the New Yorker.
Well, I think it's actually a pretty good mix. I mean, during that time, there was a lot of those things taking place, and people were kind of trying to wonder, like, what was it going to be like under his administration, because there was a divide. So you had this clash between really good cops and also those that were a little dubious. So looking back at that, and it's funny, I had seen the episode a few weeks ago and I wasn't really thinking about it, but that's how it was in 2014. Everyone was pretty concerned because you just didn't know where people stood at that point, and everybody was just covering up for everyone.
Here's what kind of bothered me about this episode, right? So you have the cops that we've come to know and love. So for us, they're supposed to be like our hero cops, right? They're the ones who were like the new mayor, and they're saying it in like a derisive way. And then the prosecutor, who's supposed to be like the avatar for the quote new mayor, is a super douche, or at least he's played that way. So basically, this administration that's saying, which, by the way, I think a lot of people would say is the right thing to do. Stop and frisk is bad. It profiles like only black people and like over polices only in one community, and has led to like a tremendous amount of like wrongful convictions and wrongful arrests. Like, that's the right side. And this episode of this show is kind of like putting both sides of its feet on the wrong side of this social issue, which surprises me.
Well, Kimmie, you like all three of the franchises, so you're
Correct.
very well versed. And, if you go back even to the Law and Orders of the 90s, there have been a lot of episodes that are based on rip from the headline, police shooting incidents, racially charged incidents. And they seemed to me this particular time that the characters were more hostile to this idea, and maybe that's the way they wanted to write it that way. But it seems like compared to like dozens of episodes in the past where they play it sort of even-handedly, where they show you a little of this and a little bit of that, all for dramatic effect. I was kind of surprised at how overtly hostile the characters are to this idea of police reform.
I just think that at the time when a lot of this was going on, people really didn't know how long would that administration really stick to that. So you didn't want to get used to the idea that, oh, okay, things are going to change and then they don't. Just politically, it was a very interesting environment when he came in. He did a lot of different changes. In the midst of change, you may be nervous to go ahead and do something that's new, because if it switches up, then you have a target on your back if everyone realizes, okay, we're not doing that anymore, but you went against us. So I think that might be like some of the tension. And during that time, it was just, there were a lot of things that he changed, and many people didn't think he was making a lot of friends, and it was tough. It was tough for the first few months. And in many respects, even now, I think there are certain things that people still feel a certain kind of way about. But in the beginning, he was against a very big hill at that point.
Yeah. And up against a hill like cops like Cragen, like all around good guy, saying about the 14-year-old victim.
Yusef, does he at least have a record?
It's minor buzz.
Does he at least have a record? Which is like, that was the part of the episode where I was like, what?
Well, I think we're probably seeing Cragen deciding, I had enough of this shit. I'm out of here.
Exactly. I'm ready for my cruise of 6 months. Get me to like the end goal. I'm done.
We have a parade of Hey, It's That Guys.
Yeah.
Hey, it's that guy.
And women.
And women. Look, there are so many. I can't do the usual thing where I'm going to ask you to guess a whole bunch of stuff. So we're just going to kind of lightning round this a little bit, okay? All right. So first off, we have our usual suspects here: Elizabeth Marvel as Rita Calhoun, Dean Winters as Cassidy, and Robert John Burke as Tucker. Mel Harris plays Cragen's girlfriend, Eileen. Where do we know her from, Rebecca?
30-something.
She was Hope on 30-something. That's right.
Well, you're very sweet to invite me.
Greg German is the prosecutor, Derek Strauss.
You poked your gun around the wall and started firing without looking, yes?
Anybody know where he was from?
Well, he's Ally McBeal and also Grey's Anatomy.
Bygones.
Richard Fish and Ally McBeal, yes. Kathy Moriarty is Captain Tony Howard.
I hate to ask, but I'm going to need your weapon. You know the drill.
What is her claim to fame?
Raging Bull, right?
That's right. Yeah, she was nominated for an Oscar, a Golden Globe, and a BAFTA as Vicky LaMotta, wife to Robert De Niro in Raging Bull. So, a patrolwoman McKenna is played by Vicky Judy.
When he was making the deal, I saw a flash of metal. Then in the hallway, I got hit by a bullet that he fired.
Kimmie, you know who this is.
Yes. Well, she's on Orange is the New Black, and I've styled her, so I love her. But yeah, I was like, oh wait, she was on that show.
Yeah, she was Janae. She was the inmate who misplaced the screwdriver that Piper was. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, Jabenga Akinabe is Amaro's priest.
Maybe one lesson you can learn from this is why pride is a sin.
Anyone recognize him?
Nope.
He looked familiar, but I couldn't place it.
He is the leather suit wearing pimp Larry Brown on The Deuce.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I cannot wait till that show comes back on. Yes.
Okay, we do see one person before they were famous.
Before they were famous.
Who played Reverend Curtis Scott? Anyone know?
Leslie Odom Jr.
That's right.
You can't stop and frisk anymore, so now you shoot to stop.
Famous for originating Aaron Burr in Hamilton and responsible for your teenager singing I Want to Be in the Room Where It Happened. Okay, anyone recognize, ready? Teen number 2?
Teen number 2?
Literally, teen number 2.
No.
No.
We didn't see nothing.
That's Jeremiah Richard Kraft. He's now a series regular on Marvel's Luke Cage. He plays D.W. Griffith.
Oh.
Now, anyone know who played Yusef Berry, the Zero Lines wheelchair rolling victim?
No.
They went to pains for him to not have any lines. Like there were scenes where he could have had lines where they were like, shh, don't say anything.
That's right. He did it. That is Aubrey Joseph, who now plays Cloak in Marvel's Cloak and Dagger on Freeform.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, now this is where I would usually play a clip, but I can't. It's not. You didn't say anything.
Well, he was very expressive with his eyes.
That's right.
He was.
A lot of eye acting.
All right.
Yeah.
Are you ready for this one? Last one. Who played Grand Juror number 1?
Oh, Lord.
One of those eye-rolling, totally earnest grand jurors?
No, the one who got to ask the question.
Oh, the one who was like...
Do you think it would have made a difference that night if you hadn't been drinking?
Anyone know?
I don't know.
That's Tina Fabrique. You know what her claim to fame is?
What?
She sang the theme song to Reading Rainbow.
Oh,
what?
Butterfly in the sky.
Wow.
That one?
I love that.
That's a good song.
Oh, my God.
It's a damn good song.
She's got some pipes.
She does.
Okay.
But that's random AF.
It's super random.
Yeah, it is.
So, friend of the show, Sarah D. Bunting, has said that the writers really never knew what to do with the Amaro character until just before they got rid of him.
Yeah.
So, as they would sing, how do you solve a problem like Amaro? Are we supposed to like him, Rebecca?
I don't fucking know. All I know is that I don't. And from the minute he comes on screen in this episode, I mean, really the only time Amaro is likable is like when he's about to leave, when he's been like disgraced and he's on those crutches, and like that's the only time he's ever like in any way redeemable. In this episode is a perfect example. Think about the cold open. He's in the gym, he's boxing, he's working out, he's angry about something because he's always angry about something. And then Ice-T comes in and is like, we got to go to Liv's for her party because she's been promoted to sergeant. And then he continues punching the bag and you're like, are you mad because the lady got the promotion, Mr. Anger Management?
Yeah.
Or are you mad because it looks like she's going to be leaving? Like, it's never articulated. And then he has all these earnest scenes in the episode where we're supposed to think that, like, I just fell back on my training, I did what was right. Like, you want to believe him. But nothing about the rest of him makes you want to believe him.
Yeah, I think that this is a guy, and I don't really fault Danny Pino, the actor, for what he was kind of handed to him.
He's an okay actor, like especially his close-up shots in this episode, like when he's on the stand and stuff. Like he does a fine job with the super shitty, unlikable material he's being given, for sure.
Yeah, I think he does, and we kind of laugh at this when we call it face acting. But I think his expressions, over the years, sort of this low tolerance for frustration that you see on his face, I think he does that very well.
Yeah.
I think that, but, the rest of it around him is kind of half-baked.
That's right. And the way that he acts, I mean, maybe it's because he's just acting through the terrible role he's been given. Like, I don't blame, I mean, I kind of feel like the whole marriage breakup thing, it's like because of the way he acted the part, like he's always just a simmering ball of rage, like just below the surface.
Yeah.
For no discernible reason. And in this episode, there's one scene where he has a discernible reason to be a simmering ball of rage, like when those teenagers shoot through the windows of his house and his daughter's in there. And he goes outside with the bat, and he's no more angry with that bat than he is when he's just sitting in his desk in the squad room.
All right, now let's talk about the second half of this episode. Amaro is represented by Uber defense attorney Rita Calhoun. He says he can't afford the bail, and if he can't afford bail, he definitely cannot afford Rita Calhoun.
Then you need to think a lot bigger than this. One PP is hanging you out to dry. They're making you the fall guy.
Well, whatever you say.
Nick, all of us have your back.
With racial tensions running high, someone fires some shots through Amaro's window. For his safety, Benson invites Amaro to stay at her apartment with her boyfriend Cassidy. Awkward.
Oh, boy.
It's okay, he's never home.
Yes.
Right.
The special prosecutor wants Amaro to plead to a hate crime. He refuses, but he knows that a grand jury indictment against him is the end of his career. Against the advice of his lawyer that he's paying $1 billion for, he testifies at the grand jury. A juror asks the detective if he would have acted differently if he'd been chasing a white girl instead of a black boy. Amaro explains he's tortured because he was following his training and yet a teen was left paralyzed. But faced with a similar situation, he'd do it again. And interpreting that answer to mean that he'd be shooting fewer people, the grand jury fails to indict. And what will the writers do with the last 5 minutes of this episode? Well, Cragen says, well, now that shit with Amaro is over, I want to let you know I'm retiring. Right fucking now. The guy who never left the office says, I'm going to see the world with my non-dead, non-hooker girlfriend. Then he goes back to his office, packs up 400 episodes worth of shit in one brown paper bag, and walks out of the Law and Order universe after 25 years.
With a white paper bag, which is totally not good continuity, Law and Order set designers.
It had the handle. So is the best advice Benson gives Amaro to come back to her apartment where the guy investigating him is like doing her in the other room?
All I could think about was like let's just play this out, right? Let's say Amaro is indicted and then is tried and then is on the stand. Like, wouldn't there be like the most outstanding cross-examination about this investigation? Officer Amaro, where were you living during this investigation by the Internal Affairs Bureau? Come on.
And then there's that whole point of like when he was at home with him and he's like, oh, how's everything going? And it's like, well, what do you mean? Like, you're investigating me. I'm now at your house. What am I supposed to respond to you about?
How you doing? Not good, Cassidy. Not good.
Yeah, so some teens fire shots through his window where my daughter is.
Yes.
And Tucker shows up
where my children play with their toys.
Exactly. There was a little Godfather 2 in that, wasn't there? So Tucker shows up to investigate, and he says, you can't do what you just did, but I would have done it, and even worse.
Yeah, really good there. Nice IAB work, Tucker. Nice job not being a hypocrite. It's kind of like in the same episode where Cragen tells him,
Nick, I can't make this decision for you, but have you thought about what your life would be like without your badge? I said before, I can't tell you what to do, but you take their plea, you won't be able to live with yourself.
I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to tell you exactly what to do.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, Cragen's advice was...
Mixed messages all around.
Yeah, and, whenever you see Tucker and Cassidy, like, walk in together, Benson's got to be like, I'm going to be doing him, I'm going to be doing him.
It is hard to believe when you see Tucker in this episode, like... He is so old.
Exactly.
Like, not that there's anything wrong with like getting with someone who's not in your generation. But he is so old, and he looks so old in this episode.
As opposed to Dog Meat Cassidy?
Well, Dog Meat Cassidy does not look great, and Benson looks fantastic. She's like the phase where she's wearing like the all black all the time, and she's got that amazing like Burberry trench that she like sports halfway through the episode. By the way, I know I talked about the parade of fashion runway outerwear, but can we just talk for a second? I'm sorry, Kevin, you love it so much when I do this, but at one point in this episode, Calhoun is wearing a houndstooth winter coat with like just a regular leather belt trenching it. It is dope. It is amazing. It is an amazing piece of outerwear for this show, which is saying something.
I love that look. I mean, when it hits the fall, you see that look all the time. I'm looking at that. I'm like, oh, that is so chic. It's simple. It's effective. It looks really good.
Sorry, Kevin.
Very good.
We just hijacked your show.
Hey, that's great. So when we see some grand jury proceedings, we know that there's not going to be a trial, right?
Well,
that's like seeing Gary Busey in the first scene. You're like, okay, we know who did this.
Well, I kind of thought, I mean, even though I have seen this episode, full disclosure, at least 150 times.
That's what makes the podcast so good.
There is a point before Amaro testifies where you think like, here comes the indictment, because it is not going well. But then amazingly, Amaro himself, douchebag of the day, manages to turn that shit around. It's actually kind of incredible.
Yeah, so we go into the grand jury room, Kimmie, and there's that woman who says to him, butterfly in the sky, I can go twice as high.
Take a look.
No, take a look.
Let's throw the book.
Let's throw the book. A big indictment. No, she actually says,
so you honestly think you did everything right?
There's no right way to shoot a 14-year-old boy, cripple him, and put him in a wheelchair. I've always prided myself on following my training and my professionalism and respect for the law. Since that night, I've been struggling to reconcile how doing everything right could lead to such a horribly wrong result.
If this terrible thing happened because you veered from your police training, the law says you're accountable for that. But if you didn't veer, you're not. So basically what we're asking is, would you veer from your training in a different way so that to try to avoid a different regrettable outcome? Now, as cold as it seems like the only answer you can give to that is, no, I would have to do it the same way.
Right.
Does that make sense or not?
It did make sense. It's probably, honestly, in that particular exchange, he was the most likable for me at that point, because he was just like, I own it. I would have done it the same way. And I was kind of like, aw, that kind of sucks, because she was giving him some serious side eye. So
There was a lot of side eye.
There was a lot of side eye, arms wrapped.
Although, did you see, like, after he gave his answer, there were people there, like they had their fingers on their mouth going, like really kind of.
They're like,
okay.
A lot of contemplation.
Well,
let me marinate on that a little bit.
Well played,
Exactly.
detective. Well played.
I mean, it's kind of tough, because I agree with exactly what you said. If someone poses that question, you almost don't have a choice to say something like that. It's a pretty tough position to be in.
It makes a difference, though, that we saw the scene, right?
Exactly.
It really did look to us, the viewer, like someone was shooting at that lady cop. It really did.
Well, sure,
Absolutely.
she got shot in the leg.
That's right.
Everybody assumed, well,
That's right.
who would have thought it was a ricochet that she shot herself?
Exactly. And it's different from when, say, Baltimore cops say, I was just following my training, when the training includes, let's plant drugs on this guy so we can arrest him.
Right.
Like, it's a little bit different. I mean, as a viewer, yes, the outcome is that he shot this young unarmed boy. But we see what clearly looks like cops getting shot. I mean, it does look that way as a viewer, and that's the one way in which this episode is clever, despite the many ways in which it's not, is that as the viewer, you see your cop heroes doing all these super shitty things to help Amaro through this dubious situation, in which, to me as a viewer, I'm like, no, he's going to be fine anyway, because he actually did act appropriately given what we saw.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, he does seem like really kind of heroic in the beginning. He chases the suspect on foot. He's able to pull a patrolwoman to safety after being shot.
He resists drinking the wine before he finally gives in.
Yes.
Yeah.
It wasn't his choice. That was peer pressure.
Yeah.
He even agreed that he would have taken the blood test immediately and not to wait. Like, there were steps that he did to make it make sense.
Yeah, but even after having those glasses of wine, he was going to give Rollins a ride to the train station. And I'm like, did you not see that episode where Claire Kincaid gave Briscoe a ride home? It just does not turn out well. Now, in a positive, yet unceremonious display, Cragen announces his retirement.
Yes.
I didn't want to announce this until Nick's situation got resolved. But it's done, and so am I. I'm leaving.
What?
Now, who thought that the send-off was commiserate to the legacy of this character?
The send-off was exactly the same as the send-off that Dorothy and Oz gives to the Tin Man, the Lion, and the third person, whoever that was, when she's going back to Kansas. It was exactly the same.
Nick, you're going to get through all this. You're too good a cop and too good a man not to. Amanda, I was never sorry that I brought you up from Atlanta. I would do it again. And Finn, what can I say? For a guy who never should have been an SVU detective, you're okay.
I'll miss you the most, Finn.
The sort of shitty thing he said to Ice-T, which was like, you don't belong here.
Someone who never should have been an SVU cop.
What the fuck?
And it's like, wait, what?
And then...
Someone who never should have been hired for this job, Dick Wolf.
There are all these other rando cops hanging around the squad room, just like, who are part of the send-off, but to whom he says nothing?
Yeah.
It's a little bit awkward.
Yeah, I had forgotten that part. He's like, right back at you, Captain. I'm like, no, he just totally, verbally demoted you in front of everybody.
I feel like that this could have been handled a little better because This is a season where this only about 6 episodes before this, Munch retires and he leaves the series.
Yeah.
And they build in the beginning of the episode is his retirement party, and they bring Meldrick back from Homicide as a crossover character, and his ex-wives, and everybody's there, and it's sort of a fitting send-off for the Munch character, who we know holds the record for being on the most television shows.
But he's going to come back and babysit.
He's going to come back and babysit. Right, yeah. He's not. It isn't like he's been killed off or something like that. Think about Cragen for a second. Starts on the very first season of the very first Law and Order.
And looks younger in this episode than he does back then.
Exactly.
He kind of Billy Buttons it. But next to Esapatha Murkison, Mariska Hargitay, and Ice-T, Dan Florrick's Cragen is the 4th longest running character on that show, and one of the longest running characters in primetime drama.
Right, except that you just had the 2 magic words.
Yeah.
Dan Florrick. I challenge you to ask any SVU fan what's the dude's name who plays Cragen. Like, the way that he's like sort of just in the show.
I think you ask somebody to spell it because they won't get the 2 N's on his Danish first name. Yeah. All right, let's take a look at the real-life story that inspired this episode. It's time for Ripped from the Headlines.
You think you know who did it. You think you know who did it. But you don't know who did it. You don't know who did it. Ripped from the headlines.
This episode was inspired by the 2012 shooting death of 18-year-old Ramarley Graham. New York officers said they spotted Graham on the street with the butt of a handgun poking out of his waistband. No gun was ever recovered. They said they approached Graham and he ran into his apartment building. Video shows that he actually walked into his apartment building and officers tried to kick the building's front door in. The cops were let into the apartment by Graham's grandmother. Seeing the police, the man dashed for the bathroom to flush a bag of marijuana down the toilet. Officer Brian Haste claims he thought Graham had a weapon and shot the unarmed man once in the chest. The district attorney charged the officer with manslaughter, but that charge was later dropped when the judge ruled the grand jury received flawed instructions. In 2013, a new grand jury failed to indict Haste. In 2017, an internal review board determined Officer Haste used poor tactical judgment when he shot Graham. Haste submitted his resignation before he could be fired. Graham's family filed a lawsuit against the NYPD. The case was settled in 2015 for $3.9 million.
Okay, so is anyone surprised that the grand jury failed to indict Officer Haste?
No, that shit happens all the time. I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, I would
I'm
agree.
actually not surprised they failed to indict Amaro.
No one was surprised about that. Now, Kimmie, you lived in New York at the time this happened, I believe, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been out here since 2001, so I don't really remember this particular case, but I do know of other ones, I guess, that are similar.
I'm not being flip, but I mean, this happens so often, right? Does it kind of bleed into one another?
Yeah, because when I heard it at first, I was like, oh, okay, was that? And then when you said the name, I'm like, oh, I guess it's that. But like you said, it does happen kind of a lot. So, I mean, even to this day, there's still things that are very similar to that are happening every now and then. Yeah. So, yikes.
There was sort of one minor touch in this episode that coincided with something that happened in the real life story, and it's the use of video. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's much more powerful to have an officer first say, no, the guy ran away from us.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Only later to be contradicted by video that shows the guy just walked away.
Right, and that's not what happened in this case. I mean, there's this weird little moment in this episode where Amaro claims the video was edited because what he actually said was like the boy didn't speak English or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even when they're watching the video in this case and they're like, oh, it looks bad for you, Amaro, I'm still like, doesn't look that bad. It still kind of looks like there were shots coming out at you.
Yeah, it didn't look bad to me.
And that you shot back out of self-defense. I mean, they definitely didn't put Amaro. I mean, we've seen other police shooting episodes of this show, including the one with Lieutenant Van Buren, that arguably look worse for the cop than this one looked for Amaro. This was a very sanitized version of a police shooting a young black kid, especially and additionally sanitized by the fact that the cop he was with during the shooting was also black. That was an additional sanitized detail.
Now, during the arraignment of Officer Haste, dozens of uniformed officers filled the courtroom in support, yet the brass did not think he was worthy of protection, having shown poor tactical judgment. So, the foot patrolmen are behind him. The guys who work inside and make these decisions aren't going to back him up. So where is the disconnect in the law enforcement community on that?
In this case?
Yeah, in this case. Well, I guess it's the same in general, right?
But that's unusual because I have to say, but like what you normally see is that like the union and, I mean, you rarely see, except in very rare instances, like there's some recent instances in California where this has happened, where like a chief will come out and say like, my officer acted poorly and we fired him and now he's under investigation and potential prosecution, right? That's rare. It does seem like what we usually see is like this block of blue, like the Brotherhood block. So I think that's unusual, right?
I don't know. I feel like a lot of times in the episodes when there's other police departments that are interacting with the SVU unit, they just have a dislike for them in general. So there's always a little bit of angst there. So maybe that's where some of that came from. And obviously the team that was, trying to put this on Amaro, they definitely had it in just to like throw him under the bus. So I think that was just kind of the whole brew of that particular situation.
Part of the issue with, getting rid of officers who were, in a bad shooting is that the process for terminating that officer is almost the same as trying to terminate him or her for chronic absenteeism.
Right.
Because there are, union contracts and other labor protections and, a due process
and a union rep.
Yeah, which is aside from the criminal proceedings. And I don't know how many of us actually have a lot of faith that, the criminal justice system is going to come down on this, because you have to, it's a fact that jurors are often very loath to hold officers responsible for things that they do in the line of duty.
Right.
Right or wrong, right? So it's up to the brass to make this happen and to take to heart the idea of reform, at least in this one case with Officer Haste, where they made the decision. And I don't know, the term is interesting. Poor tactical judgment, saying that you were trained to do this.
You're an idiot,
and you did the wrong thing.
Yeah,
and so we're going to hold you accountable for that.
Right.
I think that we need to see this happen more often.
Yeah. Yes, we do. And we need to see it happen less often.
What?
The union rep going to the hospital and saying like, no. Let's totally like fake the blood test by like stalling. Like that stuff, that's troubling. And the weird thing about this episode is that like we're supposed to be rooting for that. Like when they catch the brother and it's like, oh, we decided not to tell the brass that we got him. We're just gonna talk to him. And it's like, and Mariska is like,
we're not talking about an episode
good
anymore,
job.
right?
I know.
We've moved on to real life.
But it's troubling.
But I keep trying to pull you back to real life.
It is troubling.
But it's troubling in the episode and it's troubling in real life. And I don't think they did a good job like walking on the right side of the moral line on this one. I'm just gonna say it. SVU writers, you let me down.
Well, because obviously they're going to ask the nurse, well, what was the time difference between when you took the blood test and when he got there? And she's going to say it's 40 minutes or whatever. So I don't know what they felt that was giving him an advantage for.
Just letting the blood kind of go down, I guess. The blood.
I know that part, but it's like the information is going to get out. They're not going to sit there and say, oh, well, he did take it. They're going to say, well, he took it, but it was 40 minutes later. So it's still going to look shady. So you're not really benefiting Amaro.
That's right. Just go ahead and drink this little half plastic cup of water. You'll be fine.
Right.
Well, that is going to do it for us. We want to thank our guest, Kimmie Smith. Kimmie, where can our listeners follow you online?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram on she's.kimmie or Twitter, she's Kimmie.
And Rebecca Lavoie, how can our listeners follow you?
You can follow me in a much less stylish way, where I look like dog meat most of the time. I look like the piece of gum in the State Farm insurance ads just like Cassidy on Twitter and Instagram at Reb Lavoie.
That's pretty harsh. You can track me on Twitter at Kevin P. Flynn. You can tweet to us at Law & Order Pod or follow us on Instagram at These Are Their Stories Podcast. Our newsreader was Cy Frater. Our theme music was composed and performed by Uncanny Valleys. Line editing by Henry Lavoie. Content assistance from Travis Roy. Lily Flynn handles promotions. To get ad-free episodes of These Are Their Stories a week early, sign up for Stitcher Premium. Get your first month free at stitcherpremium.com/crime. All clips in this podcast were used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act fair use exemption for criticism and commentary. Special thanks to the elite squad of the Law & Order Wiki community for preserving the evidence. If you want to know what episodes we're talking about in our upcoming shows, go to lawandorderpodcast.com. Sign up for our newsletter for a chance to be our next Law & Order Marathon winner. These Are Their Stories was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio and is a production of Partners in Crime Media.
Partners in Crime Media.